Hello and welcome back to Parley. These are my on-the-spot responses to the prompts you folks submit. Hope you'll enjoy listening. This one is from vampbug, lifting a thought bubble from my 2025 thought bubbles from the previous year. Is the world getting better or worse? Why or why not? Yeah, this is the thing I do that people don't use super often, but it's there in case you want it. If you pay for Parley every month, I want you to be able to just get a podcast thing that is more about the topics you like. And so sometimes you might want that, but you don't know what you want to do as a prompt. So I list a few of my own from my own notes, and you can take them if you want to, or use them as inspiration. You don't have to, you can ask whatever you want, but I want it to be that you can use your slot every month and get a podcasty like video thing more about the topics you're interested in without effort if you don't want to put in the effort. You can make an elaborate prompt, and I think it's cool when people do that, but you don't need to write a video essay to be allowed to use the service. That's the intent here. So I'm glad you used one. People use them now and again, and I can always make more if people start to use them way more. Is the world getting better or worse? Why and why not? Now, obviously, we have an advantage here where I wrote this. I knew what I was getting into, right? You're not saying, you probably wouldn't, a lot of people wouldn't say it this way. Most of you are thinking, it's obviously getting worse. What are you talking about? Is there any argument that it's getting better? And, yeah, I have a few of those. But I obviously am going to humor it getting worse. And I'm going to do that by beginning to talk about Parley more, because it's a Parley prompt for me, so I get to do that. I design them to be what I think is good for Parley. One of the main benefits of having videos like this is that by not having any prep, but spending like 45 minutes to an hour talking about something, I have a very high incidence of getting to discuss subjects without needing to simplify them. I'll say again, I have a place in my life where I'm very frequently asked to discuss things without the need to overly simplify them. This is really valuable. I believe a lot of harm is done in the world by people being prompted to have an opinion about something that they just don't and they wouldn't have. But then they usually make one up and then internalize that that is now part of them. There's a few things going on in here that I'm not sure we should really try to deconstruct in this Parley, maybe. But the idea is that a lot of people both feel like it's important not to be wishy-washy, have a take, and associate their current opinions or current thought tools, their current best attempt at thinking about the world, as being an enduring thing about their personality, not just the best things they have so far. These two things combine together to create a wombo combo of shit, which is that people often internalize very shallow opinions when prompted to have an opinion about something that they don't currently have an opinion about. And to make people not do this is very possible, but you need to undermine one or both of these things, which takes some time. You can do it. I think I'm decently consistent at this. I want to not know what I think because I can spend time figuring it out, and I want to dismiss and upgrade my ideas. I think that's a sign of virtue, and that it's ridiculous and not posturing at all and doesn't make you look good to go, oh, I'm going to stick to my guns about this point beyond the point that it makes sense to. Like, that's not... If people think that that makes you wishy-washy, changing your point when the previous point is proven to be bad, you probably need to not care about those people's opinion. Yeah? Anyway, so whatever. I'll get off my whatever horse about that. No, of course I won't. That's what the rest of the Parley is going to be. The point is, yeah, one way in which the world is getting worse that I definitely agree with is that I think the number of times you're prompted to have an opinion that is oversimplified has gotten way out of control, incredibly too out of control. If you watch the news, first of all, just why? Unless you have any plans to influence events in the world, which you may, and that's great. But if you don't, it is a huge mental cost, a huge burden, like a mental cigarette that you constantly chain smoke while looking at things, as bad for you mentally, if not worse. To just watch events that you have no intent in playing a hand in. It's good to be informed, but it's quite hard not to know about major societal things. Habitually watching the news rather than just checking in seems quite awful. And one of the unique ways in which it's terrible that maybe isn't as obvious, rather than it just making you feel doom and gloom about everything, is that it often prompts you to sort of update your thinking about something without real additional information. You just sort of feel more negative and like you maybe ought to do something or change course, but without real additional information actually being provided. Also, the news is really built around making things that are caused by the same thing sound like disparate events. This is bad, both because it's just not true a lot of the time. A lot of the time there is no new event. This was always going to happen if you thought about this triggering event. And because those things often prompt you to think about things anew in different ways without having actually gained additional information. Pondering things is good. Re-chewing on something that isn't even that related to you anyway without getting any new information is just mental treadmilling that will exhaust you for nothing. So I want people to be informed. You understand, I'm not saying that. You could translate this negative point into it's become much harder and less healthy to be informed. Okay, I would agree with that. I'm making the point this way because I think that it's interesting when you consider ways in which the world might be getting better. Can you see where I'm going with this yet? Anyway, I think it's bad that the world is currently a place where, for most people, they're prompted to have an oversimplified opinion a lot more of the time. And social media in general, Twitter, is a really bad place for this kind of thing, where often you will say a good, relatively longer explanation, and some quippy short comeback that doesn't actually address the subject will, get more retweets or whatever. This is very bad. That is quite bad. I think that's bad. I personally think that's one of the worst things, though. It's bad. It is quite bad, but I personally think that that's most of the bad, actually, and that is something where the internet can mature over time, has matured over time, and will, I think, mature over time. I think it's really hard to appreciate humanity doing this, but social media wasn't the same in the past as it was now. I think a lot of people think of that as being because of technology. The social media isn't the same as it was in the past. But it's not that dissimilar. Some things that were there in the past are still here now, and some parts of them function in a similar way. And then an additional point is, also, obviously, humans changing would cause the social media to change. I think humans changed more. And that this is a point where the amount of technology, the broadness of the technology, something smartphone accessibility or lack thereof, and then the social media sticking around, has hit us in a teenage period where everything is the worst. Being a teenager is the worst. You know that you want things to be better, but you don't yet have the freedom to just do whatever you want. So you're in a period of your life where you are lacking that for the only real time. You don't fully want it before maybe you're like 10 or whatever, I think. Real autonomy to actually go do things you could do but are just not allowed to do, really. But you want the agency, and you really could have the agency, but just societally you are not really allowed the agency. You can't go on a road trip and work out your early midlife crisis or whatever. I don't know. But when, once you're not a teenager, most places toward the end of your teen years or in your early 20s, you will gain that agency. You want it, now you have it. 20s or early 20s are considered a pretty reliably good time for a lot of people. It wasn't for me, but I understand why people think that would be the case. And you can see where I'm going with this. I think this is the teenage period of the internet to an extent. We have enough capability and awareness to know that things are wrong in some way, but have had barely any time for society to adapt around those things. I also want to remind you there was a global pandemic not too long ago, and this significantly stunts societal growth for a little while and also makes everyone chronically online while they have massive cabin fever and incredible social anxiety. And these are not things that lead to good interactions online overall, in my opinion. Granted, there have been a lot of social connections that came out of COVID, but I believe a lot of them being forced is bad in a new way as well. This parlay is really hard to do without getting way into the weeds of my personal values about these things, so I guess I will endeavor to do that a little bit. I will never do it is the Freudian slip that I was trying to make, but there's no escape now, and I'm the one who wrote the prompt. So here it is. Yeah, I mean, I think that when people are put into a social group because they feel like they need it, that is fundamentally at odds with a successful human connection. You have to get to the point where you merely want to be in a relationship with someone or friends with someone, not where you need it to have a good, genuine human connection, because otherwise it's fundamentally a transaction. It's something that you need to be a certain way. You will capitulate to the needs or lack thereof of the other person. You will contort in such a way as to be less however you would want to be and more your imagined version of what other people want, or they will do it with you. And this does compromise human relationships. I'm aware that a lot of people currently believe that is true inevitably of all human connection, or they would go one step further and say, well, it isn't, but what you're saying is just impossible. Like you can't get to the point where you don't need people, you merely want people. Now, the want could be very strong. I'm not saying I don't really, really, really want to be with the person I'm with, for example. But I would be able to go on without this person in my life. They fill a necessary in that I want some social interactions in my life, but not like irreplaceable benefit. That just isn't realistic. Like if you think that someone has a fully unique benefit in your life, they I mean they just don't. Like they might currently, they have the history with you, but there are other people who could be that way. And I'm at peace with the fact that like maybe I could find that person, and maybe even it would be a better relationship somehow. But this is the person I've found that is this way, and I very much want to commit to being with that person. I don't find it romantic to suggest that it had to be this way. That's not romantic to me or my partner. If I may, for a moment, put words in your mouth, looks over in the direction of her desk. Hopefully that's okay. I got a nod. Go figure. We talk about this stuff all the time, and at great length. It's important to us that it be, you want to do this. You don't feel like you need to stay in the relationship. Now, there's a big difference between people feeling like they need to stay in a relationship, so they try to change things, and they need to stay in a relationship so they just maladapt to whatever's happening. I think a lot of people think that it's good to get people to like be married or trapped in a relationship, basically, or think they need a relationship, have kids together, for example, because they think that that forces people to do the growth that you need to do to have a good relationship. My partner and I agree that this growth is necessary for a good relationship, but disagree that it is good to force it, or necessary or relevant to force it. Just wanting to be together, not needing together, doesn't mean that you don't try like you need to be together, like your life depends on it. Just that we also acknowledge that it doesn't, though. That's not actually true. We're just taking the relationship seriously, I guess, if you want to say it that way, not treating it as if it is literally life or death, but putting all of our energy into it because we care about it. Not scrupling, I don't know how to say, not sparing an expense for the things that would make the relationship better. We don't need to be forced to do them. You just argue the benefits and then decide if you want them. And that's what we did. And we decided that we wanted to talk about our feelings to get what we wanted in our lives. I would hope it would be obvious that you would conclude that if you talked about your feelings. And it's your relationship. Why do you not want to get exactly what you want? That's sort of weird to me. But I know a lot of people, when they hear that, think that it means that you don't have to try. You should have a relationship where you don't need to try. No, that's not what I'm saying. And I think it's true in life as well. Yes, a lot of people oversimplify, but getting into the things I think are kind of in some ways better about the way the world is now, we also have a situation where you can try to put in more effort. You don't need to. You can have shallow social interactions that don't really matter much more easily, but your ability to, if you wanted to, have a deeper conversation has also improved in a lot of ways. Just as a simple example, I was alluding to Parley before. I mean, this can exist as a business model. at all. Granted, I don't make a fully sustainable amount of money yet, but I have planned that out in such a way that I mean, I will show you live me trying to make that into a sustainable thing. And I've done a lot of work to figure that out. It's not a guess. I calculated out that it should work out just fine, not just with Parley, you know, all the channels together. This will be a healthy part of the ecosystem. But you can be in a way where this can exist. Like that's good. You have Discord servers where people would, yes, often oversimplify their points, but also have a desire for communities where they don't. I don't think the Discord community and the Twitch streaming community and the comment section that we have on my/our videos and communities, it's kind of a mix of both, right? Parley is, you know, a solid 33 to 50% you guys. So I personally think that that is a case where it made things better. This became possible before, and yes, it also became possible to do things in a worse way. But there's a tricky thing here. I mean, in general, I feel like when you're arguing these things, you need to argue from a place of it being good. You can't just say, communication has gotten easier. If we assume that everyone is bad and does the bad thing, then that's bad. It's like, okay, well, it would be bad no matter what. Communication could be hard, comparatively, like you have to send smoke signals to people. And if people did it badly, it would be bad. But if they did it well, it still isn't a good way to communicate. Whereas this is in theory a good way to communicate. The fact that it is frequently misused is not, in my opinion, a very good argument that it is bad. It just means people are bad. People have been bad, you know. It reminds me a lot of arguments about queer culture, for example, that people are like being more gay or trans or whatever nowadays. First of all, statistically, the thing all people always point out, and relevant to this point, is like most, they kind of just weren't telling you before because you weren't very nice about it. And in fact, there were a lot of people who felt that way and you just didn't know. And now maybe you know more often. Same thing with in the United States, the Trump presidency is really the first one in my mind is an example of this phenomenon. A lot of people had this take that, oh, now that I've said I disagree with you about politics, like now you suddenly don't like me. I'm the same person you knew before. And it's like, okay, yeah, right. You're the same person I knew before, but I didn't know that you don't respect my human rights. And now I do know that. So it turns out, retroactively, I didn't know this, but you were deceiving me the whole time in a way. Maybe not intentionally. You always had a view I found reprehensible. I just didn't know it before. And you had it before, but I just didn't know before. And I think in many cases, the disagreement is those people don't understand that they're doing something hateful and human rights violating to other people. But they are, and it doesn't mean that suddenly everybody is now bad. They always were not interrogating their political beliefs. It just matters more now, or you see it more now. There's consequences right here now. So now everybody goes, people are so evil or whatever nowadays. I mean, are they, or did it just get more visible? Now, if this bothers you as a line of rhetoric, it kind of bothers me too, right? I don't really have a way to prove that. What would be ideal would be to wait 20 years and we hopefully don't all die in a nuclear war. And if that happens, I think that we are close to the cap of people being able to express out loud and like be visible with it in some parts of the world. So if you look at those parts of the world for the next few decades, you would expect this to plateau and for people to then get better at communicating, if what I'm saying is correct. I'm suggesting that people will mature at this type of communication and that will probably happen once they have sort of fully felt able to express. They can then refine and be whoever they want to be the best version of themselves they can think of, whatever it is, and whatever that means for them. And this would mean that it would stabilize, like things will get no worse, but then will get better from a communication perspective. I think that they have, but I'm at a tricky part of my life where I got significantly better at communicating kind of recently. And so, again, kind of a watch this space thing. But that is the argument that I'm making to you. And if that's what you wanted from the Parley, you just want to hear what my pitch for the world not being like terrible is, that's it. I'm not saying that it's all roses or everything that's bad isn't bad. I intentionally tried to reference a few things I think are indeed very bad while explaining that. I'm just saying that I think that there's room to view it as part of an event that is ongoing, and we kind of don't know yet, in my opinion. I don't think things have always been like this is that good of an argument. I think it is kind of qualitatively different this time, but also that doesn't mean it's just a one-off event. We may be moving toward a sort of ground state of true human communication. Everybody tells people the things they want as well as they know them, and we move on to a new stage, which is, I guess, about people better knowing what they want. And then eventually we would get past that stage, maybe, and we'd be in a state where people know what they want as well as they could know what they want. Not only it's not just how well do they know it now. People will, as standard, live a life where they try to figure out what they really want and delve into that. And when you meet people in their 40s or whatever, they would have done that. And like reasonably often, you'd find people like that. Whereas I don't currently feel like that's the case. We might be getting there. I don't know. I guess it feels more like we're going that direction than not. That's what I'm arguing, I guess. Anyway, and so if that is the case, then we're going to be in a world where it will be much more pleasant to interact with people because there won't be a cardboard cutout. There'll be like a person that knows themselves and is secure in themselves, and you can just hang out with them if you want to. And there's no pressure, and you can do what you want to do. And I already spent all of my life so far putting energy into making my life be this way already. But I've just never heard of anybody else that has had that experience. Or I've heard a lot of people that say they have, but looking at their friend group, I don't know about that. And it's hard nowadays. You know, a lot of your society is screaming at you to not have your own values and just do this, or you'll be poor on the street. And that's, you know, that's not good. So you could argue, well, Zandy, if that's what makes the world better, the real argument is the world becoming more a place where you don't have to worry about the things that get in the way of communication maturity? And the answer to that is probably no, but it is kind of complicated. Is the world becoming more of a place where there are things off your plate and you can focus on like being yourself, more of yourself, or, you know, that ongoing evolving target that you are? There's a lot of financial inequality in the world and some financial difficulties due to some shuffling around of trade policy. Looking at you, United States. So that's kind of a no. It's not getting easier to pay your bills, sort of. Probably doesn't feel like that to most of us. Hi. Yep, I agree. Nope, that part's not good. But also, we have a lot of innovations. We do technologically, raw tech tree objectively, have more technology that puts us closer to the ability to be something like post-scarcity if our society could get to the point where it was like that. Now, there's a weird relationship here. By post-scarcity, I mean we live in a society that can passively make enough stuff that for very little work, all of the value that a reasonable person would want can be generated. And therefore, there isn't really any significance to people working in such a society. There's a couple of things in the way of that. The first thing is people have to value that thing. And currently they don't really, in my opinion. They value like being given money with a stimulus check or something. But most people still have this idea that they idolize work and effort, not value, not getting something out of the effort, but just putting a lot of effort into it, or earning by just putting a lot of time and effort into it, the right to, you know, get some amenity, money, or accolades or something. And this is immature, according to me. It doesn't matter. It's fun to put effort into things, but it doesn't make things better in and of itself. Effort is, if you want to think of it this way, more of an end in itself, not a good in itself. It's something you can enjoy, but it's not a proof by which you hold up, hey, I like wasted my time in this way, therefore praise me. Like, nah, I'm not going to. And so I think that until people kind of get over that a little bit, there's a problem with moving toward post-scarcity. So there's a weird relationship between these things, because the more we get amenities that take things off our plates in our daily lives, it's easier to eat good nutritional food, or we have better health science about that, or we get your gut microbiome in order, or you are able to deal with weight loss better with new drugs that help you feel satiated. I don't know, many other things, right? Tons of other things. You don't need to charge your phone as much or some, I don't know, lots of things. These things all add up and make it so you would, in theory, have more time to think about what would make you truly happy and fulfilled as a person. And I think that this will lead you to more seriously considering trying to move towards a post-scarcity economy. You will find that dumping effort into things to try to prove that you're valid or worthwhile is empty and nothing really means anything, and that's actually good. And you can just assign meaning however you want, but there's no way to like prove that you're meaningful. And I think that people getting more free time will lead them to more agree with that, which will lead them to more want a post-scarcity society. This sounds like a feedback loop. The more amenities you get, the easier it is for people to value amenities, which makes them prioritize them more, creating more that can help other people prioritize them until we get to a whatever. A lot of people who would be detractors of this perspective would say something like, but all of the innovation or a lot of the innovation and money, which still matters in our current society, is held by people who hold all the cards, and they will perpetuate that being important. So we're not actually moving closer to post-scarcity. You're just reinforcing the advantage of the people that have the money. I think it's fair to say both happen. There are people in the very weird nowadays, what you might call middle class, who I think do gain additional free time that does have an effect on how they live their life and think about themselves. And also, there's more of a monopoly over certain industries than there was before. I think both are happening. Whether you consider that to be negative or not, I mean, like, it's again sort of the thing, like, people were always bad to each other or didn't respect each other. They just didn't know. They were able to pretend they respected each other. You may be divided. I think that humanity is on a path that could end in us understanding each other better. There are people who think that the lies told to each other in previous society, where we didn't know that we were bad to each other, are necessary. It's not possible for those people to genuinely understand each other. And I just don't agree with this. Like, it's debatable, but I don't agree with it. I think that the premise of discussing anything is that we could understand. And I think that it's ridiculous to suggest that people like can't be on the path to understanding each other. You have to lie to each other. You have to be ignorance is bliss. There is no other valid approach. I mean, you can think that. If you consider the implications of thinking that way, I think you'll quickly realize that it negates the point of most any actions. Like, you probably wouldn't bother to do anything, no? And so, I mean, you could do that, but if you're going to do anything at all, I feel like the premise of that is that you think it is possible that things could end well, or you're maximizing being a passenger. You just want to see how humanity goes. And I feel a little of both ways, all right? I'm not here to tell you, more than halfway through the parlay, that the world is getting better. I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing a parlay like that. I don't think that. But I feel it's a mixed bag. And I feel like it's sort of silly to say it isn't a mixed bag. A lot of the things that make it bad also make it good. You do have to use them for them to make it good. But I don't think that people not using them is an argument that they're not good. Like, there are amenities and things you can get in your daily life for a pittance nowadays with global shipping that can tremendously improve your everyday life and convenience. And the fact that people maybe don't know about those things or aren't using those things is not in and of itself an argument against them. It would be if we would then argue that the system we live in doesn't help you get time to use those things, but I don't think that's the case. Like, just as another example, imagine you got into like espresso and you had to figure that out all by yourself. Well, you don't. You have all of YouTube culture nowadays. You have return culture. You have selling things on the secondary market to support you. It's a lot easier to get into espresso in that way, and we've invented lots of new things that make it easier to quickly make an espresso or consistently make an espresso. Things like automatic espresso people, the needling tool, the WDT, is that what it's called, that you use to make the grounds not clumpy so that it doesn't mess up the extraction. That thing, the little screen that people are putting on top of their espresso to disperse water dispersion screen above the espresso, mostly for pre-infusion, in my opinion, Good, that's a good thing that exists. It's very easy to get. You could just have it. Standard size portafilter baskets are now easy to look up the details of. Great. You can get a tamper that is calibrated with a spring and leveled so that you always tamp with the right amount of force for a certain amount of. It's actually sort of complicated. Again, espresso people, like, I know, but it's easier than if that didn't exist. We agree. Yeah. Anyway, and you can get one that you can calibrate. Like, you can change it. These things make it easier to do things. They do make it easier to do things. Cooking well is arguably significantly easier than it was. You can get some banger level tips from people cooking online, and we've reached a point that delights me in humanity, where the incidence of people who are popular not following the dogma has increased like a lot, to a critical mass, where you can expect that a meaningful amount of the popular people in a medium will not follow the orthodoxy for that medium. This is a huge deal because it means that popularity now drives some innovation instead of it just cementing the old fogies or whatever. The English department at my college is an example of this. There were enough professors that didn't just idolize the literature and instead thought about the subject and were willing for some feedback, that it was a vaguely useful experience instead of just a total waste of time where the professor masturbates into the book that they like. That has changed. I think it's changed. People who were educated at a different time from me, younger or older, I don't know. Tell me what you think. I don't know. I'm not saying for sure that means it's better, but I think that's a thing that may be trending in a positive way. That's my pitch. I think that it is easier in some ways to be more thoughtful than it was in the past. So what do we got? Objectively, technologically, you could argue we're closer to poor scarcity. There's some technology stuff that makes it easier to have more time to think about yourself. There are some online spaces that make it easier to have a meaningful conversation with people. They also make it easier to have a non-meaningful conversation, but I'm writing that as a win for the world being better. You may argue otherwise. I personally think that people essentially already thought this way to an extent. Remember, I made the argument at the beginning of the parlay where I said, yeah, but also it does make some people have like a much stupider take than they would have. It does. I personally think overall it's still considerably a good thing, just not only a good thing. Easier to just figure things out on your own. This is kind of the thing I said about the espresso machine. Yeah. And then advantage of thoughtfulness, gaining stock. What I mean by this is that there's more places in society where being good at thinking on your feet is actually valuable. Basically, there's this problem in like maybe the early 2000s or the late 1900s, 1990s, where you still have to do a job that is repeating drudgery or like something pointless. Like my partner always complains about needing to make marketing emails that we all know nobody really looks at, but the company just wants to posture that they're a fancy, expensive business that redoes all their marketing every quarter. And so they're kind of just shoveling money into a hole to change something that, yeah, might catch people's eyes slightly more often, but like that's not much of a human good. And so what she's doing is sort of pointless. But I mean, you don't have to care about that. That's kind of what employment is. The point is, we live in a world where it's easy enough to become thoughtful enough to be bothered by that, but a lot of people's jobs still are like that. And what I'm saying is good here is that the amount of ways you can do something productive in the world that will make you a living, which like are not terrible to a person who's thoughtful, is going up, in my opinion. This is, again, debatable. But if you're an artist, for example, yes, a lot of artists are threatened by, for example, generative AI, but I would argue the degree to which you are a humanist and you show your process and you're interested in your process and you don't make art commercially, you make art because you want to show people something and then they resonate with it and support you. That in some ways, well, if not an advantage, I'm not going to call it an advantage, but you do stand out in a way that maybe people didn't always before. Maybe people didn't always acknowledge that. Again, people have always devalued artists. AI art reveals that people devalue artists. That was true before. AI art reveals that it's true. which means that we can pull off the damn band-aid. This is a good thing, in my opinion. There's all these things where it feels like we're at a ground state, and I know, being a sole proprietor professional, that you don't want that thing to change. You don't want it to be that gets jostled around, and then everything goes to shit, and you got to pick up the pieces, and it destroys your career at a critical moment. I know, for sure. I'm in the exact same place. That being said, the fact that we get to pull the band-aid off and actually have a real philosophy of art is good in the long run. Don't you think? If you're an artist and you actually care about like thinking about art and stuff, isn't it good that everyone has been revealed to be shallow about this and now people will actually develop thinking about actual art? That's good. It's partly good, don't you think? So it's obviously bad in a lot of ways, right? Like generative AI has been one of the, it's not really useful unless you have really good questions, which means you don't need it. It is of minor benefit to people that already have ludicrously specific questions. But if you don't, it doesn't provide anything of value. And if you do, you could have done it yourself anyway. It just makes it easier, you know? I've had some very interesting experiences where, I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I wanted to understand Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So I played it, and using the help of ChatGPT, I attempted to kind of teleport to the game's endgame understanding much faster than I would have otherwise been able to. Give me examples of people putting in counter tech and like workflow for making a competitive deck and responding to the metagame, but delete all of their incredibly biased and focused on the metagame or whatever comments and just give me the information. And this is what ChatGPT is actually useful for, if anything, but not what most people use it for or understand it to be useful for. It's also not that useful. I could have just looked up all that stuff myself and edited out people's shitty commentary. I just didn't want to do that myself, so I decided to enlist help. But I mean, it's not like it would have prevented me from doing this. You see what I mean? I definitely don't see that as a win. ChatGPT type general large language model intelligences, if you want to call them that, help me on very rare occasion, but I don't really need the help. Like never for anything I really need to. In fact, I have mostly stopped bothering and significantly engaged to just understand what's going on because people don't understand generative AI or large language models. And I understand them a little. And I think that was worthwhile. But it made me keenly aware that it's not actually that useful to me. And it's basically me providing the value. I just know a good question and it can answer it in a unique way. But I could have gotten it answered without that. So go figure. I think it's bad. A simple example is somebody asking for a deck in Magic the Gathering. ChatGPT, make me a deck with, this card as a commander. For one thing, if you've tried this, try it. It's surprisingly bad at that. But, you can get a reasonable result. The bigger issue is, what is the point of this? There's not really any benefit to doing these recreation activities other than doing it. Now, if you want to go play with your friends and they all play a game where you build decks, but you don't like building decks, you might think that this lets you just get a deck and go, but build systems have always had that as an out. You could always have just looked up a deck list. People have been doing that for decades. You can buy the now excellent, by the way, I don't like Wizards of the Coast, but the pre-constructed deck product is really good nowadays. Like, it's really good. Like, go buy one of those. If you're in this situation, do not ask ChatGPT to make you a deck. Go buy one of the pre-cons. Like, they're great. Like, you don't need any help. They have that at just ask the guy at the local game store counter. He'll help you, I'm remembering my guy fondly. Your local game store counter may be anyone, but I thank you, game store counter from my high school. He was really cool, very generous and patient while I flipped through his binders and bought like $5 of cards while taking up the counter space for, just 45 minutes, right? A ridiculous amount of time. No, that was not a good thing to do. He was very nice. Thank you to that guy. So what I'm saying is that I don't think the generative AI thing is a big win. I think that people gaining maturity on the value of art being the process and the story we create around the art, Or if you want, it can be an expression of your physical skill, but that is sort of a wholly separate thing since we have like cameras and stuff. If you want to paint an image that is true to real life, the image finished without any context from you is kind of debatably not that valuable now. But your experience of it, your process of making it may be, and always has been, more of interest to people. Think of museums where you see the placard that explains the context of the art. I have some problems with most art being you have to acknowledge its story as part of the art, and it's really not the piece by itself, it's the context with it. But I'm completely fine with just saying that the context is part of the piece of art. I just don't think that that's good as standard practice. Literally no art isn't plus its context. Yeah, you can think of it that way, sure. I just feel like there are some people who aren't creating that way, and it would be good to make the distinction, that's all. And that's fine. The fact that people are gaining maturity about this way of thinking about art is good. And maybe you disagree with me. Well, don't you think people being willing to entertain different takes on the subject is better? If you want me to change my mind, isn't that more likely if people like actually think about it than before? Again, I'm aware that this is a cruel sounding point, a cruel thing to say if you are a person who is self-employed in these industries that are threatened. But as somebody in that position myself, who stands to gain immeasurably in the long term if humanity becomes a group of people that more values like actually thinking about things, yeah, my potential audience is going to be huge compared to what it was before. Just at the short-term kneecapping of, oh, like people are being shallow about it for now, and then we'll just grow out of it. People will get used to it. It's not amazing or incredible to just be able to have a good quality image of a thing. That has kind of been possible before. It's not that amazing. People will get over it to an extent. And the people that don't will have revealed themselves, and that's useful too. So I just don't view it as being that bad in the long term. There are many other problems with generative AI and large language models. But them devaluing art, I really don't see this as being a gigantic issue in the long term. I feel like it's something where it will work out to be a good balance. And if this sounds like saying that all AI is good, it definitely isn't. That was just the only good counter argument to one part of it. And it's basically an argument that people won't use it that much in the grand scheme of things, or, you know, normal people who actually care about things in the world. Business people maybe will use it a lot. I'm just arguing I don't think it's going to like break art forever or something. It may prompt significant growth in the human arts, not necessarily some long-term net negative. However, obviously there'll be lots of collateral damage to me, other people, self-employed people mostly, probably sole proprietors or independents, and also basically everything else about it is bad. So it's quite bad. Again, this is not a video where I'm going to say, oh yeah, like it's all actually good. Like, no, it's pretty terrible actually. I'm just saying that there are some parts where I feel people are a bit jumping the gun, a bit doom and gloom. And a lot of the more optimistic takes, like I saw this video or a post online that I might be able to find for you, that somebody sent me. Yeah, I had ChatGPT write a Decemberist song by Colin Malloy, who I think is the lead singer songwriter guy, guitarist for the Decemberists. I don't know that much about this band. And he writes, I'll link it in the description if you're interested. Is it free? I don't know if it's free. Anyway, it's on Substack. I'll link you what I have. I think it's free. I'll try to check. Where he has ChatGPT try to write a Decemberist song. He has it write lyrics. He has it write chord progressions, kind of write a melody or musicality, and then he records it. He sings it and plays the chords that it gave. And this is an exercise in showing what you lose by using the system. I think it's great that he did this. However, big however, his conclusion is, in my opinion, completely wrong. I'm going to read it to you because we have just barely enough time. And again, I mean no shade here. I think that this is a good point, but isn't a good argument against generative AI. So it's a good part of a discussion, but on its own, it is a very weak point. That's why I'm bringing this up. Colin Malloy, hey, no shade. I just think this is a really good example. Thank you very much for making this article. It's very useful. Okay, that being said, quote, I asked ChatGPT what they would call their creation, and they said Sailor's Song, which is awfully basic, but you can't account for taste, indeed. For the record, this is a remarkably mediocre song. I wouldn't say it's a terrible song, though it really flirts with terribleness. No, it's got some basics down. It mostly rhymes in all the right places, though that last couplet is a real doozy. The video has the article has the lyrics. It uses a chord progression, 1, 5, 6, and 4, that is enshrined in more hits from the Western pop canon than I care to count. But I think you'd agree there's something lacking, beyond the little obvious glitches, the missed or repeated rhymes, the grammatical mistakes, the overall banality of the content. By the way, loving your writing style, Mr. Malloy. Getting the song down, I had to fight every impulse to better the song, to make it resolve where it doesn't otherwise, to massage out the weirdness. I wanted to stay true as its creator's vision as possible, and at the end, there's just something missing. I want to say that ChatGPT lacks intuition. That's one thing an AI can't have. This is this argument. Intuition. It has data, it has information, but it has no intuition. One thing I learned from this exercise, so much of songwriting, of writing, of creating, comes down to the creator's intuition, the subtle changes that aren't written as a rule anywhere. You just know it to be right, to be true. That's one thing an AI can't glean from the internet. So alack, looks like I'll be writing my own songs for the foreseeable future, end quote. So what I did was ask ChatGPT to tell me why it cannot add the human nuance that a human could add. And it said something similar. You know, there's a sort of human intuition about when a moment is meaningful, or we've experienced a pattern of experience for ourselves that isn't always represented in data, and people are always kind of shy about like sharing these vulnerable moments, but we know what they are, and if you're a creator, you can find that. And then I said, but isn't the incidence of those human elements interrupting an action scene to have a flashback of when you made, bread with your grandma before she was killed by assassins in this fantasy plot that I just made up? Isn't the frequency that people add those human elements highly calculable? I took a class called Digital Humanities in college, and ChatGPT said, yeah, I agree that it could be. Now, ChatGPT has a very bad habit of agreeing with you, so you should always be wary whenever this happens. If you ask a subjective, unprovable thing and ChatGPT agrees, you always want to feel like, the model is kind of just trained to do that. So I said, can you give me an example? For example, show me in a piece of text, you can see what I'm about to ask, where the human element is. And ChatGPT can, of course, do that for you. Show you in an excerpt of, hilariously picked Moby Dick, which I think is incredible, and the perfect example, where things deviate from the pattern you would expect. Because of course it can tell you that. It's a large language model. Its whole thing is it knows those patterns. So of course it can show you where something is statistically unlikely and say a bunch of stuff about it. But then I said something to the effect of, write me a passage that doesn't have any human element and then add it, which it of course can do because it knows where the human element would go statistically. And then I said, so you just did write the human element. So why do you say that you can't write it? And it said something very useful, which is, I think is basically correct, surprisingly enough, which is that it doesn't know when to add that. It doesn't have a prompt to add it. It sees no data-driven reason to add those things. Does that lack intuition? No, I would say. Big no. No. That is lacking a good enough set of the rules. There is a rule, it just isn't written down anywhere, that all humans already know. But it is a rule that you could write down. It just isn't a rule that is written down that much. You absolutely can get those results from ChatGPT. You just need to have a very good question from the start, which I think I do. But sure, that is something that it does not have. But to say that that means it then can't do it is factually incorrect. I'm not trying to be argumentative. That literally just is not true in a meaningful way. It's not at all that it can't do it, nor does that really make any sense. If there's a consistent human phenomenon we can all discuss, it can't easily not be captured by something like a large language model. If we all know about it, and it's represented somewhere in our society, there's probably some written evidence of it existing, and therefore it can be statisticalized into an existing construct that you could map with data, that you could absolutely use a large language model to purvey. And I'm honestly disappointed that somebody who writes songs for a living would think that it's so simple as what Colin Malloy said. Disappointed, I say with affection. I think you are smarter than that. And if you pushed yourself, would realize that it's more the process of making the thing, that it's in fact the irregularity of those moments, the imperfection, the not bettering, the not making it better of the piece. That is what people like. People don't, after all, like things that are good. They like things that are fun, novel, interesting, surprising in some way, that have enough stuff out of the way of enjoying them that the human can enjoy it. But I don't think most people's favorite thing they've experienced, if they've experienced a good amount of things, is something like that is as good as possible. It's something that's as bespoke as possible a lot of the time. And yes, that is something that ChatGPT will reliably not output, but not at all because it lacks the ability to have that intuition that's being described. It's actually sort of the opposite in a way. It's that the human has a reason. Well, there really is no reason, but the human doesn't have a special reason to privilege just making something good. The human can use much more esoteric reasoning to do things to a piece of work that just don't add up or do anything, that all humans do not know intuitively. And that's why people like the art. Anyway, I hope that I did something to make you feel at least a little more happy about the human spirit and human capability, even if I basically just said there actually are a ton of bad things about the world, and every good thing I said was a good thing about the world is actually a bad thing about the world. But there's like a tiny good part. But sometimes, mostly there isn't. So yes, if you'd like to get your own parlay like this one, you can do so using a link in the description. Or perhaps you'd like to just support the show. Did I bring you some existential depression unaccounted for, not part of your schedule? Send me a $5. I would be highly grateful. You could, if you wanted to, pay for the full parlay and get your own prompt like this one. You can write whatever you want as a prompt, and I do also offer these suggested prompts if you ever just want a podcasty thing about a thought you're a bit more interested in than not. Vamper, how'd we do here? Vampbug, there were arguments for being optimistic in this play. Hey, you try to make arguments why the world is getting better, okay? I'll see you in the next one. Fight me.